Hey everybody, Pierre Quinn here. Welcome to another edition of Sunday Night Live, Elevating Your Leadership. I really love our Sunday Night Live segments because Sunday Night Live is a space for leaders to connect, a space for leaders to reflect, and a space for leaders to be equipped to handle the challenges of Monday morning and beyond. Now, I know we've been away from Sunday Night Live for a while now, and it's good to come back and hang out in this space again as we are in the fourth quarter of 2022. Now, if you don't know anything about me, again, my name is Pierre Quinn, and for the past 15 years, I've been teaching leaders how to better assess their strengths, how to build stronger, healthier organizational cultures, and how to foster the relationships that lead to personal and professional transformation. My work encompasses some keynote speaking, some workshop facilitation, and hanging out in the virtual space as well, working with leaders. So I'm so glad that you're hanging out with me, either hanging out live, and I want to invite you to check in and let me know where you're leading, or if you're watching the replay of this, feel free to check in as well. Let me know who you are and where you are leading. What capacity are you leading in? Now, our conversation today is about leadership biases, and we're only going to talk about three of those biases. I know we could do a multi-part series on biases, and maybe we will, depending on how this session goes. But all of us, in some form or fashion, are wrestling with biases as a leader, and if we're not careful, they can totally derail our leadership. Now, this video, this session, this live stream is brought to you, is sponsored by Content Creators University, and Content Creators University is doing something real special in a few weeks that I have the privilege of being a part of, and we're going to hear a message from Content Creators University in just a few moments. I want to thank them for sponsoring our session this evening. Now, again, today we're talking about biases. We're going to talk about three of them, and then two strategies for navigating, two strategies for overcoming our biases. And again, it's the fourth quarter of 2022. We recognize, my planners out there, my strategists out there, my visionaries out there, we recognize how we navigate this fourth quarter of the year, how we navigate 2022, this last section of 2022 really sets the stage for how our 2023 is going to turn out. And a big part of that is being aware of some of the biases that we have to navigate, and how we can overcome them as leaders so that we can be better to ourselves. We can better lead ourselves. We can better lead our teams. We can better lead our people overall and lead our organizations. So I can't wait to jump into these three leadership biases with you in this session, this edition of Elevating Your Leadership on Sunday Night Live. But before we jump into that, let's hear a message from Content Creators University. Creators Unleashed Act 2 conference is coming up real soon. I just happen to be one of the keynote speakers for this conference. So we got a message from Content Creators University, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about these leadership biases.
Content Creators University presents Creators Unleashed Act 2. A 2-day power-packed free virtual conference to teach you all the secrets to growing your business with content creation. This is for coaches, teachers, students, leaders, entrepreneurs, videographers, graphic designers, YouTubers, podcasters, beauty professionals, bloggers, social media strategists, artists, music composers, authors. Anybody that uses technology today needs to show up to this event. This is taking place November 17th and 18th from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Grab your free ticket today by going to contentcreatorsuniversity.com/conference. Seats are filling up fast. It's first come, first served with 10 power-packed speakers. JP High Tech, Tanya Smith, Kirk Nugent, Toy Sweeney, Monty Weaver, Carissa Jennings, Troy Sendage, Pierre Quinn, Jeff Barch, Jermaine Freeman, Creators Unleashed Act 2, in partnership with our official sponsor, Ecamm Live. You do not want to miss this. This will be fire.
I'm so excited about Creators Unleashed Act 2 and speaking for that conference. Shout out to Content Creators University and my guy, JP High Tech, for sponsoring our live stream session tonight. As we're talking about our leadership biases, what's your leadership bias? We're going to talk about 3 of them and then 2 strategies for navigating, for overcoming our biases. Okay, a bias, if you're not familiar, and I know this word has been floating around a lot over the past couple of years, and some of us have heard it, but we haven't quite attached it to anything, or we haven't done a deep dive study or reflection on it. And a bias is simply, from a dictionary definition standpoint, a bias is simply a disproportionate weight in favor for or against something. A bias is a disproportionate weight in favor for or against something. And we recognize that as leaders, as we're navigating ourselves, as we're navigating our people, as we're navigating our organizations, we all have to deal with both internal and external biases. And I want to talk about 3 of the internal ones that nearly every leader has to wrestle with from time to time. And for the first one, I'm going to draw here on the board. And that first bias that I want us to reflect on, as you see, I'm drawing a boat here. Let's put a sail on this boat and let's make an anchor for this boat. Because the first bias that I want us to reflect on is the anchoring bias. And the anchoring bias is this idea that we latch onto and put more weight on the first thing that we hear. Now, in college and undergrad, I studied communication. I did a graduate degree in communication as well. And we had to take a couple of courses on media literacy. And our professor had us track a news story until it fell out of the cycle. And how the story was first reported in many cases was drastically different than how it was finally reported before it fell out of the news cycle. And what would happen as you would look at responses to the reporting, that despite the fact that the story would change, that the details would be added and clarity would be brought forth, people still held on to the first way, the first depiction, the first revealing of a particular news story, and they put all the weight and put all the credibility on how the story was first told. And that's anchoring bias. It happens to us today. A social media post will come out, a tweet will come out, we'll see something on Instagram, and it'll be a little piece of information, it'll be a little perspective on a story, and we just jump on it. We just jump on it headlong. And then as successive pieces come out, we still sometimes commit ourselves to the first version of that story. Now think about how many times you as a leader, especially early on as you joined an organization or took the lead role on a particular team, and the first person that came to you with some perspective, the first person wanted to clue you in, the first person wanted to give you a heads up, the first person wanted to give you some insight, help you peek behind the curtain to catch you before everybody else got to you. And the information they shared with you, if you were not careful, the information they shared with you fed into this anchoring bias. And sometimes we've made decisions, I know I have, made a decision as a leader simply based on that first initial piece of information and no additional perspective. And when that happens, when we put all the weight on the first thing that we hear, then at that moment we're wrestling with anchoring bias. Okay, I got 2 more. The next one I want to share with you is, and I'm gonna draw a little calendar here. Let's put November 22. Let's put some blocks in our calendar here. The first one is anchoring, The second piece is called planning fallacy. And planning fallacy says we drastically underestimate how long it's actually going to take to get a job done. How many of us have ever done that before? Even going back to college, we thought I can get this paper done in a week. I have plenty of time. I can knock out this paper in 3 days. I can knock out this paper in a night. We drastically underestimate how much time is actually going to take to get a job done. Do you know? Do you know who has the navigation of this particular bias under control for the most part? And the industry that has this particular bias under control as it relates to navigating planning fallacy is the dry cleaning industry. And let me tell you why this is the case. I grew up in a dry cleaners, my family owned a couple of dry cleaning operations. And in many dry cleaners, even today, you'll see a sign, you'll see an advertisement. And the advertisement says, if you get it in by 9 a.m., if you get your garments in the door, if your garments are paid for and go through the process, if you get them registered, we fill out your name and we tell you how much it costs. If that's completed by 9 a.m., then you can get your clothing back the same day by 5 p.m. Now, remember, we used to have the signs on our dry cleaning building and on business cards and on flyers, in by 9, out by 5. We wanted to bring to people the convenience factor. Hey, if you dropped off your clothing, if you dropped off your shirts or your suits or your dresses or whatever you had, if you dropped it off before you went to work, before 9 o'clock, then we would give it back to you by the time you left work, in by 9, out by 5. Let me give you a little dry cleaning secret. The truth is, for the most part, I would say 85% of the time, your clothing is actually done around noon. Let's stretch it and maybe say 2 p.m. Your clothing is done early in the day. I know for us, especially in the summertime, when I worked at the dry cleaners with my family, we would get as much as we possibly could done early in the day so we could turn off the machines in the afternoon because it would be so hot. So someone would drop off a garment at 9 a.m. and sometimes by 11:30, 12 o'clock, that order was completed and it was hanging on a rack. It was recorded where it was and it was ready to go. But it was still in by 9, out by 5. Well, why give such a wide window? Remember, we're talking about the planning fallacy bias. Why give us such a wide window? Why not say in by 9, out by 12? And maybe some places do that or did that. But why not say in by 9, out by 12? Because we dramatically underestimate planning fallacy. We dramatically underestimate how much time it will actually take to get something done. And the reason why a dry cleaner says in by 9, out by 5 is because anything could happen throughout the course of that day. And they want to give themselves enough time, enough space, enough padding, enough buffer to make sure that your clothing is done by the end of the day. So they give themselves all day to do it. And when you show up at 5 o'clock and they hand you your garments, you're excited about it because you were able to experience that convenience. But what would happen if they said in by 9, out by 12, and it wasn't done by 12? It wasn't, you couldn't pick it up over your lunch break. What if the dry cleaners consistently underestimated the amount of time it took to guide your garment through the process? Well, eventually they would lose clients, they would lose customers because they were thrown off in their planning. How many times have you been working on a project as a leader? There was a great idea that came out of a strategic planning session, or a group of leaders went to a conference and came back with all of these ideas and had a meeting, sent a mass communication out and said, hey, we're going to roll out this new initiative in the next 2 weeks. And everyone's all excited, and 2 weeks pass and it doesn't roll out. 3 weeks pass, it doesn't roll out. 4 weeks pass, 6 weeks pass by and it doesn't roll out. Why? Because planning fallacy suggests that we significantly underestimate the time, energy, effort that it takes to actually get something done. So we're talking about leadership biases. When we talked about the anchoring bias, we hold on to the first piece of information that we hear and sometimes make all of our decisions based on that. Planning fallacy, we underestimate the amount of time it actually takes to get something done. And here's the third one we're going to talk about tonight. The third one is, and I'll just put a check mark here for our third one. And this happens to us all the time. Well, let me not say it happens to us all the time. Let me just say it's a common one for us as leaders to have to navigate. And this third bias is the confirmation bias. So we have the anchoring bias, we have the planning fallacy, and we have this confirmation bias. And the confirmation bias says that we actively seek, we pursue information that supports our currently held opinion. We're looking for someone to agree with us. And have you ever been in a situation like that before where someone comes to you for advice? They come to you for perspective. They've already made their decision, but they're coming to you for advice. They're coming to you for perspective. And what they really want is for you to agree with them. They want you to confirm the opinion that they already have. How many times have you held on to a piece of information or you held on to a thought? Hey, maybe everybody in your family is a pickup truck driver. They love their vehicle of choice is a pickup truck. And you're thinking about purchasing a pickup truck. So you look for articles in favor of pickup trucks because you're looking for information to confirm or to support the decision that you've already made or the perspective that you already have. And it's so dangerous for us as leaders, not just confirmation bias, but also planning fallacy, also anchoring bias. They're dangerous because we reduce the amount of outside perspective that we bring in, and it actually leads to less effective decision making. So, what are some of the things that we can do? What are two things that we can do as leaders to properly navigate, to properly overcome the anchoring bias, the planning fallacy, and the confirmation bias? Well, I got two of them. Number one, a huge thing that we can do as leaders is to have more self-awareness training. More self-awareness training. More opportunities to understand what our particular biases are and how they're impacting our decision making. We need to be more aware of our preferences as leaders, more aware of our tendencies, more aware of our behaviors, more aware of our inclinations, because these dramatically impact the decisions that we make. And there are so many leaders out there who are not self-aware and who have not gone through any self-awareness training, any emotional intelligence training, any relationship or team building training. So if you want to better navigate, better overcome, better deal with your leadership biases, one of the strategies to do that is to have more self-awareness training. Here's the second one I want to give us tonight as we prepare to close Sunday Night Live. The second one is not just self-awareness, but the second one is leveraging what is called collective intelligence. And collective intelligence is really just a fancy way of saying, hey, how can we get more people in the room to have a facilitated, strategic conversation around the decisions that we're looking to make? Because sometimes as leaders, we go into a room and we have a great idea and we jot it down on a piece of paper and we send it to the people that directly report it to us and we tell them just to roll it out, just to make it happen. But how many times are we losing the power of collective intelligence, the power of the great thinking, creativity, perspective, experience of the people in our organization or on our teams? How many times do we miss out on it by not holding space and inviting people to sit down and have a conversation about some of the decisions that we're making as leaders and the direction that we're looking to go. So if you want to better navigate, if you want to better overcome this tendency to hold on and make decisions on just the first piece of information that you hear, or you want to overcome the planning fallacy of underestimating how much time it's actually going to take to get something done, or if you want to overcome this confirmation bias, this tendency just to look for people and resources or research that agree with the opinion that you already have, well, do these two things. Number one, better self-awareness, more self-awareness training, more support around being self-aware. And number two, leveraging collective intelligence through facilitated discussions and strategy sessions. Now, if you need some help with that in any form or fashion, myself or my team are happy to support you. Would love to connect with you. Feel free to reach out to me by responding to this post. Send me a DM or send me an email, pierre@pierrequinn.com. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you tonight on Sunday Night Live, talking about elevating your leadership and some of the leadership biases that we wrestle with, and reminding us that as great leaders, we work to overcome and to navigate these biases, not just for our team, but for not just for ourselves, but for our team as well. Again, shout out to Content Creators University and Creators Unleashed Act 2 for sponsoring this edition of Sunday Night Live. And I look forward to hanging out with you again real soon. All the best as you live, as you learn, and as you lead this week. Take care.